Hello, everyone out there. Whether you're joining us live or you're watching this recording, it's so great to have you here today. My name is Aurora Dreger, and I'm from the Educating All Learners Alliance. And today's webinar is Modernizing Classroom Instruction, hosted by Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA for short, and the Modern Classrooms Project. So before we start, here's some housekeeping items so we can all enjoy today's presentation. We are going to use the chat function to communicate, and we really want this to be a lively and engaging live session. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to type in the chat. Let us know who you are, your role in the world of education. And as our presenters ask any questions or prompts, please feel free to jump in and let us know your thoughts. You can also use the drop-down menu on the chat if you want to directly message the hosts and panelists. That way, your question or your comment won't be seen by all attendees. Closed captioning has been enabled for this meeting. You can turn yours on or off by clicking on the box that says CC on your control bar. You can also drag and drop that box anywhere. The box contains the captions anywhere on your screen, and your preferences will not affect anybody else who's watching. And the live transcript will be available after the session and emailed to all registrants. And speaking of recording, you may have noticed that we are recording this session. This is so we can share it on ELA's YouTube page and share it out with our registrants and attendees and reference it in the future. But of course, if there's any sensitive information or personal stories that are shared, that will be edited out before the final recording. There's going to be a lot of links, resources, emails, social media handles, all that kind of good stuff shared in the chat. After the webinar, I will send that information out in an email to all registrants. So even if you couldn't attend live and you're watching this recording, I've sent an email to your the email that you use to register with. Don't feel like you need to hurriedly take notes unless that's how you operate. That's how you want to do it. Before we dive into today's content, some background about ELA, the Educating All Learners Alliance. We are a coalition of nonprofit organizations dedicated to producing and sharing resources, programs, and events just like this, dedicated to supporting students with learning differences. And one of our ELA partners is the Modern Classrooms Project. And that's who is presenting with us today. With us today is Tori Rose Deannan from the Modern Classrooms Project. And with that, Tony Rose, I'll pass it over to you to start off today's presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aurora. I'm so excited to be in this space with you all. It's a pretty small crowd today, and that's okay. I absolutely love that, actually. But just some fun facts about me. I was an educator for 10 years, middle school English. I taught all levels, everything you can imagine. They put all of the kids in my classes, and so it was a fun time. Loved middle school. I taught middle school English. And then I was an instructional coach before joining Modern Classroom full time. And so I am currently the community engagement manager for Modern Classrooms Project, where basically I'm the designated hype person for our educators to make sure that they feel supported and empowered to continue implementing a self-paced, blended, and mastery-based learning environment to better cater and accommodate to all of our students, especially our students with learning differences, disabilities, and all of the things that you can imagine, right? And so with that being said, I know in the chat, if you would love to just kind of share out, how familiar are you with the Modern Classrooms Project, if you've heard of it? So are you a 1, where you have no idea what that means? 2, still assessing at this point? 3, you totally get that? Or 4, do you know I'm actually good at this? Like, you've heard of us and you've seen our work, and it's totally okay if you're at a 1. So I'll give us about 5 seconds to just kind of put that in the chat. Ooh, beautiful. Okay. So we have some 1s, we have some 2s and 3s. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yay, I love that. You have no idea who we are, and this is beautiful. I love that. That's so cool. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. So when we think about changing our classroom practice, right? Modern Classrooms is actually not a curriculum. So we don't provide curriculum PD at all, right? So we're not, going over curriculum or selling curriculum or anything like that. We're also not an ed tech PD. So we utilize technology in the classroom to enhance our teaching and learning, but we're not an ed tech PD. And so what we do essentially is we we basically have this new model of teaching. So basically learning, we teach teachers how to redesign the classrooms to be student-centered and differentiated using any tool or curriculum. So this is how we are constantly trying to just change our classroom practice, right? And so if you think about it, it's kind of like a mix, like this Venn diagram, right? Like we're both and so it's really exciting. And so when you grab or when you get these resources, when you get the slides, there are videos for you to showcase what this means essentially. And so modern classrooms, we empower educators to meet every student's needs. There is a possibility that we can meet every student's needs, but we just don't know how, right? So I know that when I went to teacher training college, I was taught what to teach, but I was not taught how to teach it. So differentiation was something that I was always getting docked for on my evaluations because I just really struggled with it, and there hasn't been a really great way to show me how to do it. And so when you have the chance, definitely watch these videos. This right here is a high school, and then this right here is elementary school. So if you're thinking about creating a blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning environment, which all three words you've heard of for many years now, but you just never know, you didn't know how to do it. We have educators who are implementing this in kindergarten, pre-K, all the way up to adult learners. And so what we're going to cover today, we're just going to cover our modern classrooms approach with examples, and then some opportunities as well for you to just kind of dive into how to get into our community. And so when people ask me like, hey, what do you do? Right. My response is always, I'm trying to disrupt the traditional way of teaching and learning. We all know that lecturing and the traditional way of teaching and learning has not been helpful for so many of our students. And so something that I always tell our educators too, if someone from the 1800s were to come into 2023, everything would be changed except for education, because education has been pretty much the same structure for many, many, many years. And so what that means is we have lots of different groups of students in our classes, right? We have our students who are on grade level and present. So basically, when you're lecturing at them, it's way too easy for them. And then you have your students who are not there because of whatever reason, right? Life is happening. And so they're absent for whatever reason. And then they just can't catch up with the content that you're teaching them. And then, of course, as we all know, we have a large group of students who are below proficient in math and English, right? And so these students are just kind of lost, and they are not getting the support and guidance that they need. And so what that means is it's leaving the teacher to feel like a failure. I definitely was like that for majority of my time teaching. I really wanted to be able to differentiate and support every single one of my students. And I really struggled with how to do that because I wasn't taught how, and I didn't know where to get the guidance and support that I needed. And so with the traditional model, it really leads to us failing our students. It stresses us out as educators, and then we waste the most precious resource, which is time. I am all about teacher time, and I know how important it is because I was in the classroom for so many years, and I hated it when people would waste my time. And so the traditional model just has not been working, and it does waste a lot of time. And so what does that mean? Well, we have an instructional model. We have our blended instruction, our self-paced structure, and then our mastery-based learning. And so what that means is in a blended instruction in modern classrooms, teachers limit whole class lectures. We're no longer standing in front of the class for 10, 20, 30 minutes, trying to gain every single one of our students' attention, right? And then getting frustrated when we have a group of kids who are not paying attention or who's interrupting because they need to go use the restroom. That's like another thing that I absolutely did not like. And then we also have teachers creating original instructional videos and resources. So the teacher is still teaching. It's just in a video at this point and not live lecturing. And it's not also one of those things where they just pull a video from YouTube. Our educators are actually creating these videos. And then the students can access instruction materials at all times. One of the teachers that I worked with said that her kids can now have her in their backpacks, right? They can just bring her wherever. So that means that they can sit with their families and their caregivers and learn together. I know that in education, how often do we hear about like families and caregivers trying to have a conversation with their student about what they learned? And the response is always, I don't know, right? Or parents feeling really overwhelmed because they don't know how to teach the new math. Right. And so with this, the videos, instructional videos are able to be accessed by all stakeholders. So it's not just the students, but it's everyone who's involved in that student learning. And so when we think about the IEP accommodations, right, because I taught a lot of students with IEPs and 504s, this model really helped out because it just naturally provided these accommodations for them. So if we're thinking about students with learning disabilities, I was able to provide instructions orally. I was able to provide text on an audio. I was able to allow breaks as much as they wanted, because with the video, you can pause, you can rewind, you can fast forward, you can skip ahead, you have all of these controls, and they're not depending, they meaning students are not depending on me anymore to be in the front and having to repeat myself. Because again, that's like another thing that our educators do a lot, right? Is repeating ourselves. And then also, we're able to present work in chunks, because in modern classrooms, we really highly recommend creating videos that are no longer than 6 to 9 minutes long. Because as we all know, we're kind of competing with TikTok, and that's like 90 seconds, right? So the shorter, the more concise it is, then the more specific it is. And it's really chunking it so that students are able to process what they're learning and not just watching a video for about 10 to 15 to 20 minutes, which is kind of like equates to us traditional teaching, right, with our lectures. And then, of course, it provides our visual support. So when you have a video, you have your PowerPoint already, you can point to it, you can highlight it, you can do some animations, but really being intentional with the visual supports that were provided in those slides. And then if we think about our students with dyslexia and dysgraphia, we do provide guided notes and or printed notes along with the video. So for me, I know when I was implementing this, it was a barrier, especially for my students who are learning English, to just write it out in those guided notes. And so what I did was, you know what, we're going to focus on one thing at a time. You're going to watch the video, and then we'll do a retrieval notes. So that means that you can just write down everything you remember, and then we can have that conversation about what you did remember and what you didn't remember. And then I also provided a cheat sheet for every single lesson that I had, which means now as an educator, I can no longer utilize those the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I had to get my students to create stuff so that they're transferring the skills that they're learning. And then, of course, highlighting the essential information, right? So again, really being focused and specific on the things that we're learning in class. And so with that being said, right, like I said, here's a video that one of our educators prepared. Here are the guided notes. It can look different. It can look however you want it to look. There's autonomy for how our teachers create the guided notes and how they create the practices as well that go with the videos. And then we have our self-paced structure. So this one is really, really challenging, right? For the most part, people assume that when we have self-pacing, it's just like, oh, it's free, all do whatever you want. There's no guidance. But in reality, self-pacing actually has a lot of guidance. It is way more structured than not self-pacing. And so in a modern classroom, students are self-paced within each unit of study. So for me, I had like 10 weeks. I broke that up into mini units. So sometimes you would have 2-week mini unit, and sometimes you'd have 3-week or 4-week mini unit, but it was never like a 10-week unit, depending on the age, right? So each lesson is classified as must do, should do, and aspire to do. These are kind of like, before you were just kind of thinking about extensions, right? Like what do students do once they're finished? But in this case, it's a lot more intentional, because our must do are like the basic foundations of what students need to know to be able to master those standards and skills that we are presenting in class, right? And the should do and aspire to do is more like deeper knowledge and deeper practice with the skills that they're learning in those must-dos. And so with the classifications, then it is up to the educator to either tell the students, you know what, I would like for you to do all of it, or you know what, just do the must-dos for right now. We have educators who label every single lesson, and have educators who don't label it, just so that students can't skip around and choose whichever one they want to do. And then, of course, the teachers track each student's progress daily to help students stay on track, right? And so, again, when we talk about self-pacing, it is very much so lots of guidance and support rather than it being a free-for-all. And so these are just examples of things that our educators have created. And so we have a game board where they can see right away how many lessons are there in a unit, how many must-do, should-do, aspire to do, how can I utilize my time? With self-pacing, it teaches our students to advocate for themselves, to also help with their time management, to prioritize things that they need to do. And so these are all like life skills that they need outside of the classroom. Here's another picture, another example that we have in fifth grade. And again, this is where students could either have a copy for themselves, or it could just be a class tracker. And then the teacher can just, either put a magnet on there with the students' names and students just move themselves. But in this case, it's really beautiful because then I know like, hey, I'm having problems with lesson 2. So let me see who's on lesson 2 and who's already mastered lesson 2 that I can go and approach. So again, it becomes more of a collaborative learning space as opposed to it just like sitting there and just being frustrated because you don't understand or you don't know who to ask for help. And again, kind of tying this in with our IEP accommodations, right? This provides flexible deadlines. There's soft deadlines and there's hard deadlines. So the soft deadlines, our students know that like, yeah, it would be nice to be turned in this time, but also know that like, here's a hard deadline. After this hard deadline, you cannot turn anything else in, right? And so this then requires for teachers to set up reminders, to teach students how to set up reminders as well. And then also keeping in mind, like I taught English, so I used to have like essays on my desk for like 2 weeks up to like a month after they turned it in. And so I wasn't able to provide that feedback right away. And so having the flexible deadlines is also really good for me as a teacher, right? And so I'm able to just be like, you know what, this is due on this day, so then I can give you feedback right away. But then knowing that like some of you will probably be a little bit later, some of you will be earlier, that's okay. That kind of chunks my grading as well for me, which is always a plus. And again, allowing frequent breaks, right? Because self-pacing, we're no longer expecting our students to all be together. They're all going to be in different paces. It's going to be like kind of like a chaotic and organized chaos, right? And then, of course, a checklist. And one thing that I really, really love about this model, there's so many, is the fact that there's transparency now. So there's not that element of surprise. There's not that like, here's a pop quiz today, you should have been paying attention, but more so like students know in the very beginning, like, hey, this unit, this is what we're covering, and this is how many lessons we have in this unit. So then I can again start thinking about how I'm going to tackle this and how I'm going to master the skills and standards we're covering in this unit. And then, of course, it requires, we now have time. Like we're no longer lecturing. We, meaning educators, are no longer lecturing. So then it frees up our time to do frequent check-ins with our students. And so if students need our help, if there are some students who need more guidance, then I can give them that guidance, right? And so thinking about that, it really, I remember implementing this model, and the first week I was like, oh, they don't need me. Like the class is going by without me. They don't really need me. And I was quickly reminded, you know what? I can actually go sit with this kid and make sure that they're okay and just be there as like a support for them whenever they need. And then, of course, with accommodations for testing, too, we have this extend allotted time. And then, of course, administer tests in several sessions, because, again, the pacing can be a little bit different for every single student. And then our third pillar is mastery-based learning. And so what that means is in the modern classrooms, we have our bite-sized assessments that we call mastery checks for each lesson. So again, this is just scaffolding and chunking things. So for example, as an English teacher, instead of students writing a whole essay, we chunk it. So for, 1 week we did the intro. Another week we are, putting in evidence, explaining those evidence. So really chunking it so that students can access the task that is in front of them and it won't be as overwhelming. And again, that goes with educators too, right? Then I could say, oh, I read everybody's intro already. And I know what my students are writing. I don't have to wait until the very last day of the unit to grade all the essays. So by that time, I already know what my students are writing and I can already kind of gather like where they would fall in the rubric. And then, of course, teachers define criteria for mastery and help students reach it through revision. There's now time for revision, which before I didn't have that time when I wasn't implementing the model. There's also reassessment, right? When students are ready. And this is kind of like this is practicing how to embrace mistakes, that we're not perfect. We're not going to get something one time all the time. And so having our students really practice this and kind of embracing the revision and the reassessment is also just such a beautiful thing, right? Because then it's like disrupting the perfectionist, it's disrupting the like one and done. And so it just allows for students to really embrace their mistakes and learn from them. And then we also have plenty of time for reflection, because now for every lesson, you could have a reflection for students to showcase, like, hey, what went well? What didn't go well? Please give me feedback. So now student choice and student voice is part of your learning experience, right? And it's not just a teacher doing all the things all the time. And so mastery data really informs their progression. And so students cannot move on to the next lesson until they've shown mastery on the previous skill. And there are different ways to do this as well. So sometimes, like, there are educators who do self-pacing on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Or they do self-pacing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, they come together as a whole group. And then on Friday, everyone takes a mastery check, right? And then the teacher will then grade the mastery check right there and then provide that feedback and have the small groups ready for the following week. And so these are just more examples of mastery checks. This is the mastery check corner, where students will go if they're ready for mastery check, so that the teacher, again, it's a visual, right, of saying, like, okay, I know now that these students are taking their mastery checks and that's where they are. And again, keeping in mind, right, with the IEP accommodations for students with learning differences, learning disabilities, again, like I said, chunking and scaffolding, right? We're able to provide immediate feedback right away. Nothing is on my desk or my laptop forever because I didn't have the time to grade it just yet. It also allows for processing time, and then it encourages revisions. And when we think about testing, right, I could administer the testing in small group settings. I could administer it in one-on-one settings. So really thinking about how to provide, like, multiple times to practice and just different options for students to be able to feel successful and empowered. And so you've heard me talk about blended learning, self-pacing, and also mastery-based learning and grading. So in the chat, how are we feeling about this? And have you used any of those pieces in the model of your classroom? It's either a 1, 2, or a 3, or 4. Again, in the chat, you can just tell us, have you used any pieces of the model in your classroom? And it's 1, I have no idea what that means. 2, still assessing at this point. 3, I totally get that. And then 4, do you know I'm actually good at this?
I was going to say, your wait time is immaculate. Your teacher wait time is incredible.
Oh, I love silence. It's like my favorite thing. But yeah, no, this is great. So we'll just continue just to save time. But you're more than welcome to participate in the chat. So what does that look like? How do you get more information? So our trainings actually consist of 2 different things. We have a free online course that kind of goes over all 3 pillars, all 3 different parts of our model. And it is all online. It's asynchronous. You get to do it on your own time. And then our community is so large as well that if you want to reach out to any of the teachers or even go onto our website and just use that chat bot, they will link you up with folks who can answer your question. And this is available to all educators, signing up anytime, complete anywhere, right? And then we have our virtual mentorship program, and this is the paid mentorship program. And in this case, this is where you're actually going to be partnered up with an educator who teaches the same content as you, or even an educator who teaches the same grade level, uses the same tech as you, whichever your priorities are. It's kind of like a dating app, where that's kind of like the algorithm that we use is like, that's how we pair you up with each other, which is always so exciting to me. And so the virtual mentorship program structure, you'll be able to build 3 modern classrooms lessons, actually, which is really great, something that you'll be utilizing in your classroom. So again, we really do we do find our teacher time to be precious and important. So everything is super intentional. It's something that you can use like tomorrow. And so you have 5 key assignment submissions. The time commitment is about 25 to 30 hours for both the free course and the mentorship program. But the free course, you can just kind of sift through and see. You can still, I don't know, there's no submissions there. So just a heads up on that. We do have a self-pacing tracker. You have your instructional videos to watch. So basically, we're doing what we're preaching, right? We're not going to talk at you, but we're just going to, essentially, you're going to explore, and you're going to be this learner who's a self-pacer, and just kind of access all of our information via videos and all the resources that we have. We also create all the resources, not all, but like so many resources. So if there's something that you want, we probably already have it, but Our goal is to like alleviate stress from you all when you're implementing something and when you're shifting your teaching and learning paradigm, right? You will be partnered up with an expert mentor. So we have about 200 plus expert mentors all over the world, which is really exciting. So you get to partner up with educators who are teaching the same content as you and trying to go and implement this model as well. So you have a thought partner, you have a community. We don't want you to do this on your own. And then after you do, we do have some teacher leadership pathways. We have our DMCE, which is our Distinguished Modern Classroom Educators. And then you can have, and then you can actually apply to become a paid mentor as well, which we pay like really good money per hour. I think it's like $50 an hour. And so if you wanted to join the fall cohort, it just started. So we have our winter cohort starting in January 29th. We have a scholarship for teachers who actually teach special education, emergent bilinguals or multilinguals, so students who are learning English. So if you teach those, we have fully funded scholarships for you. So if you just scan this QR code or go to that website here, you can just apply for a scholarship and you will be able to get a mentorship. You'll be able to get the mentorship program for free. So that means that we're going to connect you with an educator and it's all going to be for free. And I believe there's also a stipend after you finish the mentorship program. So definitely share this with your circle, share it with your organization, share it with educators that you know who teach special education, students with IEPs, 504s, all of that good stuff. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. With that being said, y'all, we have about 16,000 educators in our Facebook group, and we basically have, and they're sharing all of their resources, their questions, their celebrations, their thoughts, and folks are just like super pumped to be in that space with each other. And so definitely check out our Facebook group. And then of course, we're all on the social media platform at Modern Class Proj. If you want to learn more about what we do, see more examples and resources and people who are implementing this model. We do have a lot, again, of resources for you. So definitely check that out. Whew. So with that being said, I'll give you all about like 10 seconds to scan this. We love some QR codes here. I would love feedback. If you're like, yo, TR, you just talked way too fast. I would love that feedback just so that I know to calm down a little bit. And that's also in the chat. Thank you, Aurora, for dropping that. So you can just click on it and also fill that out for us. And then last but not least, again, you'll have access to these slides. We do have additional resources for you. So our free online course, you'll get that link right away. Here's our Edutopia videos, the research and impact. If you're like, hey, you know what? I want to know how legit this is, definitely click on the research and impact. We have our examples of modern classrooms, our Facebook group, and we have a podcast. So if you want to hear my voice some more, I am one of the co-hosts for the podcast where we just elevate stories of educators trying to disrupt the traditional way of teaching and learning and really creating and cultivating a learning environment where all students can thrive. So with that being said, y'all, it is right on that time, 30 minutes after the hour. I'm going to stop sharing.
That was fantastic, Tony Rose. This is Aurora from ELA, for those of you who are listening and not can't see the screen. Tony Rose, that was incredible. I think something that really stood out to me was what you said about if somebody from the 1800s came back in a time machine and they looked around, the only thing that would be the same in our society would be the way that we handle school. That just hit me so hard. Oh, and Marshmallow the cat decided to make an appearance. She always does that during my ELA presentations. I'm going to bring it home, wrap it up. So with that, on behalf of ELA and the Modern Classrooms Project, thank you for joining us today. Whether you watched it live, whether you're listening to this, the audio, or you're watching the playback, thank you for taking the time to check out the fantastic work of the Modern Classrooms Project in partnership with ELA. So this was Modernizing Classroom Instruction. Thank you so much, Tony Rose, for joining us. And if you're interested in more webinars, more events, more resources, check out our website, educatingalllearners.org. Follow us on Twitter at educateall_org. Keep an eye out for that email with links to the resources, the slides, the video recording, and other information that was shared today. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us. And thanks again, Tony Rose, for joining us and creating such a great presentation for us. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. This was great. Y'all have a good one.